David Chen never imagined his life would change forever at a rundown gas station on a Tuesday evening. He was just trying to get home after a long shift at the warehouse, his body aching and his mind already thinking about the frozen dinner waiting in his apartment. But sometimes life throws you into situations you never could have prepared for, and this was one of those moments. The gas station sat on the edge of town, the kind of place most people avoided after dark. Flickering neon lights buzzed overhead and the pavement was cracked and stained with oil. David pulled up to pump number 3, his old Honda sputtering as he turned off the engine. He stepped out, stretching his sore back when he noticed them. 2 little girls sat on the curb near the air pump station. They looked identical, maybe 7 or 8 years old, with tangled brown hair and clothes that were too small and covered in stains. What struck David most was how still they were. They weren't playing or talking. They just sat there, hunched over, staring at the ground like they were trying to make themselves invisible. David's heart squeezed in his chest. Something wasn't right. He'd been a father once, 3 years ago, before cancer took his beautiful daughter away. He knew what happy kids looked like, and these 2 were the opposite of that. He finished pumping his gas, but he couldn't stop glancing at the girls. They hadn't moved. Nobody seemed to be with them. Where were their parents? It was getting dark, and this wasn't a safe neighborhood. As he was putting the nozzle back, a woman emerged from the convenience store. She was thin, probably in her 30s, with bleached hair and a hardness in her eyes that made David uncomfortable. She walked straight toward the girls and grabbed one of them roughly by the arm. "Get up," she snapped. "We're leaving." The girls scrambled to their feet, and that's when David saw the bruises. Dark marks peppered their arms, and one of them had a fading black eye. His stomach turned. The woman noticed him staring. Instead of looking embarrassed or concerned, she walked right up to him with a calculating expression. "You want them?" she asked, like she was offering to sell him a used car. David blinked, certain he'd misheard. "Excuse me?" "These 2, she gestured dismissively at the girls. "They're more trouble than they're worth." "You want them? I'll give you a good deal." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. She was talking about selling children. Her face was completely serious, no hint that she understood how insane this was. What are you talking about?" David managed to say. The woman sighed like he was being slow. "Look, I'm their stepmother, okay? Their dad died and I got stuck with them. I can't afford 2 kids. You look like you got money. $500 and they're yours. I'll even throw in their birth certificates." David felt like he'd stepped into some kind of nightmare. This couldn't be real. People didn't sell children at gas stations. But the woman's expression was cold and businesslike, and the 2 girls stood behind her, trembling. He looked at them more carefully. They were twins, he realized, identical in almost every way, except one seemed slightly smaller, more fragile. Both had the same hollow look in their eyes, the same defeated posture. They were waiting for whatever came next, as if they'd learned long ago that they had no say in their own lives. "You're joking," David said, though he knew she wasn't. "Do I look like I'm joking?" The woman crossed her arms. "Listen, you take them or I'm dumping them at a shelter tonight. I'm done. They eat too much, they're always in the way, and I got my own life to live." The smaller twin made a tiny sound, almost like a whimper. The other one grabbed her hand and squeezed it. David's mind was racing. This was illegal. This was insane. He should call the police right now. But even as he thought it, he saw the fear on those little faces. What if the woman was serious about the shelter? What if she did something worse before the cops arrived? What if she just drove off with them and he never saw them again? He thought of his daughter, Mia. She would have been 11 now. Before she got sick, she was always talking about being a big sister someday. She wanted to protect people, to help those who couldn't help themselves. "What are their names?" David heard himself ask. The woman shrugged. "Lily and Rose, or Rose and Lily. I can never remember which is which." She didn't even know her own stepchildren's names. David felt anger rising in his chest, hot and sharp. "500?" he asked quietly. The woman's eyes lit up. "Cash, right now. This was the moment." David knew that what he was about to do was probably illegal. He could get arrested. He could lose everything. But looking at those 2 terrified little girls, he couldn't walk away. His conscience wouldn't let him. "Wait here," he said. There was an ATM inside the convenience store. David's hands shook as he withdrew the money, nearly emptying his checking account. He had rent due next week. He had bills. But none of that mattered right now. When he came back outside, the woman was smoking a cigarette, looking impatient. The girls hadn't moved an inch. David handed her the cash. She counted it quickly, then reached into her purse and pulled out 2 crumpled pieces of paper that might have been birth certificates at some point. She shoved them at him. "They're your problem now," she said. Then she looked at the girls with disgust. "You two better behave for him. And don't even think about trying to find me." With that, she got into a beat-up sedan and drove away, leaving David standing in a gas station parking lot with 2 children he'd just purchased like groceries. For a long moment, nobody moved. The girls stared at David with wide, frightened eyes. He realized they probably thought they'd just been sold to someone even worse than their stepmother. "Hi," he said softly, crouching down to their eye level. "My name is David. I'm not going to hurt you." "I promise." They said nothing. One of them, the slightly bigger one, positioned herself protectively in front of her sister. "Are you hungry?" David tried again. "We could get some food. Whatever you want." Still nothing. Just those haunted eyes watching his every move. David stood up slowly, careful not to make any sudden movements. "Okay, how about we go to my car? It's right over there. We'll figure everything else out after, okay?" He walked toward his Honda, moving slowly, and after a moment, he heard small footsteps behind him. They were following but keeping their distance. He opened the back door and gestured for them to get in. They climbed into the back seat together, sitting as close as 2 people could sit, holding hands so tight their knuckles were white. David got into the driver's seat and looked at them in the rearview mirror. What had he just done? He'd bought 2 children, actually purchased them like they were objects. The reality of it was starting to sink in, and panic crept up his spine. But then he saw how the smaller one was leaning into her sister, how they were each other's only source of comfort in a terrifying world. They needed help. They needed someone to protect them. He started the car and pulled out of the gas station. "We're going to my apartment," he said, keeping his voice gentle. "It's not fancy, but it's safe. You'll have your own room and there's food and nobody's going to hurt you there." No response. He hadn't really expected one. The drive took 20 minutes and David's mind wouldn't stop spinning. What was he going to do? He couldn't keep 2 children without telling anyone. But if he called the police, what would happen? Would the girls be separated? Would they end up in a system that might not protect them any better than their stepmother had? He thought about that woman's face, the casual cruelty in her voice. How long had these girls suffered? What had their lives been like? When they arrived at his apartment building, the girls followed him silently up the stairs to the 3rd floor. David unlocked his door and flipped on the lights. His place was small and definitely looked like a bachelor pad, but it was clean and safe. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. They crept in like frightened animals entering a trap, their eyes darting around, looking for danger. David showed them the bathroom. "You can wash up if you want. I've got some towels." He showed them the kitchen. "There's food in the fridge. Help yourself to anything." He showed them the spare bedroom, the one that used to be Mia's before she got too sick to climb stairs. "This can be your room. I'll find some blankets." They stood in the middle of the living room, still holding hands, still silent. David went to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator, pulling out ingredients for sandwiches. His hands were still shaking. He made 2 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and poured 2 glasses of milk, then brought everything to the coffee table. "Please eat," he said. "I know you're probably scared, but I promise I'm not going to hurt you. You're safe here." The girls stared at the food but didn't move toward it. David sat down on the couch, trying to appear non-threatening. "I had a daughter once," he said quietly, not even sure why he was sharing this. "Her name was Mia. She loved peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. She would have been so happy to have sisters." One of the girls, the braver one, glanced at him. Just for a second, but it was something. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to," David continued. "But I need you to know that I'm going to take care of you. I don't know how yet, and I don't have all the answers, but I won't let anyone hurt you again." The smaller twin's stomach growled loudly. Her sister looked at her, then at the sandwiches, then slowly reached for one. She took a tiny bite, as if testing whether it was poisoned. When nothing bad happened, she took another bite. The smaller one followed her sister's lead, and soon they were both eating, though they kept glancing at David like they expected him to snatch the food away. He felt tears stinging his eyes. These children had been through something terrible. The bruises, the fear, the fact that their own stepmother sold them. It painted a horrific picture. That night, David brought blankets and pillows to the spare room. He found one of Mia's old stuffed animals, a soft bunny that had been her favorite. He set it on the bed. "You can sleep here," he said. "The door doesn't lock from the outside, only the inside. You can lock it if it makes you feel safer. And if you need anything during the night, my room is right across the hall." The girls looked at the bed like they'd never seen one before. Have you been sleeping in beds?" David asked carefully. The braver twin shook her head slightly. It was the first direct response he'd gotten. "Where did you sleep?" he asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. She pointed at the floor. David's heart shattered into a million pieces. "Well, you don't have to sleep on the floor anymore. But if the bed feels weird, that's okay. Whatever makes you comfortable." He left them alone, closing the door most of the way but not completely. Then he went to his own room and sat on his bed, his head in his hands. What had he done? He'd just bought 2 children from their abusive stepmother at a gas station. He'd broken laws he didn't even know existed. But looking at those 2 little girls, bruised and terrified and starving, he couldn't regret it. He thought about Mia, about how she'd always wanted to help people. Maybe she'd led him to that gas station tonight. Maybe this was his chance to do something that mattered, to save 2 lives that desperately needed saving. Around midnight, David got up to use the bathroom and noticed the girls' door was open slightly. He peeked in and saw them curled up together on the floor, not in the bed. They'd taken the blankets down with them and were wrapped in them like a cocoon. The stuffed bunny was clutched in the smaller one's arms. Soft crying sounds came from their makeshift nest on the floor. David's throat tightened. Tomorrow he would figure out the legal stuff, the practical stuff, all of it. But tonight these 2 little girls were safe and fed and warm. It wasn't much, but it was a start. He went back to his room but didn't sleep. He couldn't. He kept thinking about everything those girls must have endured and wondering if he was strong enough to help them heal. He thought about the battles ahead, with the law, with the system, with their trauma. But most of all, he thought about 2 identical pairs of eyes that had looked at him with such desperate hope. Even through their fear, they deserved better than what they'd been given. They deserved a chance. And David was going to make sure they got it, no matter what it cost him. David woke up at dawn after barely sleeping, his mind still racing from the night before. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. For a moment he wondered if the whole thing had been some kind of stress-induced dream. Then he heard it, a soft rustling sound coming from the spare bedroom. He got up and walked quietly to their door, which was still half open. The twins were awake, sitting on the floor in the exact same spot where they'd slept. They were whispering to each other so quietly he could barely hear them. When they noticed him in the doorway, they went completely silent and still. "Good morning," David said softly. "Did you sleep okay?" No answer. Just those wide, watching eyes. He tried a smile. "I was thinking about making breakfast. Pancakes, maybe? Do you like pancakes?" The braver twin, the one who'd reached for the sandwich first last night, tilted her head slightly. It wasn't exactly a response, but it was something. David went to the kitchen and pulled out everything he needed. He wasn't much of a cook, but pancakes were one of the few things he could make without burning. As the batter sizzled on the griddle, he heard those soft footsteps behind him. The girls had crept into the kitchen doorway, keeping their distance but watching. "You can come closer if you want," he said, flipping a pancake. "I promise the stove won't bite." They didn't move forward, but they didn't run away either. Small victories, David told himself. He made a stack of pancakes and set them on the table with butter and syrup. The girls approached slowly, like deer approaching a feeding station, ready to bolt at any second. They sat down but waited, watching him. "Go ahead," David encouraged. "Eat as much as you want." The bigger twin took one pancake and put it on her plate. Then she took another and put it on her sister's plate. They ate slowly, methodically, still watching him between every bite. David noticed they ate like they weren't sure when their next meal would come, carefully, savoring every bite, but also quickly, like someone might take it away. After breakfast, David realized he had a serious problem. He was supposed to be at work in 2 hours, but he couldn't leave 2 traumatized children alone in his apartment. He called his supervisor, a gruff man named Tony who'd always been fair with him. "Tony, I've got a family emergency. I need to take some time off." There was a pause on the other end. "Everything okay, Chin?" "It's complicated. I just need a few days to sort things out." "You've got vacation days saved up. Take what you need." "We'll manage." David hung up, relieved. At least that problem was solved for now. The rest of the morning was strange and quiet. The girls followed him around the apartment but kept their distance, like shadows. They didn't speak. They didn't play. They just watched and waited. David tried everything he could think of. He turned on the TV and found a cartoon channel, but they just stared at it blankly. He pulled out an old puzzle Mia used to love, but they wouldn't touch it. He asked them questions, but got no answers. By lunchtime, he was starting to understand that whatever these girls had been through, it had damaged them in ways he couldn't see. The bruises on their arms were visible, but the deeper wounds were hidden. He made sandwiches for lunch, and this time they ate a little more eagerly. Progress, he thought. That afternoon, David knew he needed help. He couldn't do this alone. He thought about his neighbor, Patricia Murphy, who lived 2 doors down. She was a retired nurse in her 60s, the kind of person who always knew when someone needed help. He'd talked to her a few times in the hallway, and she'd been kind to him after Mia died. He knocked on her door around 3 o'clock. Patricia answered with a warm smile that faded when she saw his face. "David, you look terrible. What's wrong?" "I need to talk to you about something serious. Can I come in?" Patricia stepped aside, concern written all over her face. Once inside, David told her everything: the gas station, the stepmother, the money, the girls. He expected her to be shocked, maybe even angry. Instead, she listened quietly, her expression growing more serious with every word. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Let me meet them." They walked back to David's apartment together. The girls were sitting on the couch, exactly where he'd left them. When they saw Patricia, they tensed up. "Hello, sweethearts," Patricia said gently, sitting down in a chair across from them. "My name is Patricia. I'm a nurse, which means I help people feel better. David told me you've had a rough time." The girls said nothing, but David noticed the smaller one was trembling. Patricia's eyes were scanning them professionally, taking in the bruises, the too thin frames, the fearful posture. "David, can I talk to you in the kitchen?" Once they were alone, Patricia's face was grim. "Those girls have been severely neglected. I can see it from here. Malnutrition, old injuries, signs of long-term stress. They need to see a doctor." "No, but if I take them to a doctor, there'll be questions. They'll call the police." "David, you should call the police. What you did was illegal, even if your heart was in the right place." "I know that," David said, his voice breaking slightly. "But Patricia, you didn't see that woman. She was going to dump them at a shelter or worse. And if I call the police now, what happens? Do the girls get separated? Do they go into foster care with different families? They're already traumatized. I can't do that to them." Patricia studied his face for a long moment. "You care about them already. I just want them to be safe." She sighed deeply. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'll examine them here, quietly, and document everything I find. We'll take photos of the injuries, note their condition. That way, when you do eventually contact the authorities, and David, you will have to eventually, you'll have evidence of why you did what you did and proof that you've been taking care of them properly." Relief flooded through David. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We're both taking a risk here. But those girls need help, and I can't turn my back on children in need." Patricia spent the next hour gently examining the twins. They were terrified at first, but Patricia was patient and kind, explaining everything she was doing. She found more bruises than David had noticed, old scars on their backs, dental problems from neglect, and confirmed they were seriously underweight for their age. They haven't been to a dentist in years. Patricia said quietly. And some of these injuries are months old. David, these children were treated like prisoners. The words hit him hard. He'd known it was bad, but hearing it stated so plainly made it real in a different way. Over the next few days, a routine started to form. David would make breakfast and the girls would eat a little more each time. Patricia would stop by every afternoon to check on them and bring things. Children's vitamins, books, coloring supplies. The girls still didn't speak, but slowly, tiny changes started to appear. On the third day, the smaller twin picked up a crayon. She didn't draw anything, just held it, feeling its weight. But it was the first time she'd voluntarily touched something David offered. On the fourth day, the braver twin made eye contact with him for more than a second. Just a brief moment, but it felt like a breakthrough. On the fifth day, they both came to the breakfast table without being called. David started to learn their silent language. The way the bigger twin would touch her sister's arm meant, "It's okay." The way they both would tilt their heads meant they were asking a question, even without words. The way they gripped each other's hands meant they were scared. He learned that sudden movements frightened them, that raised voices made them freeze, that they expected punishment for the smallest mistakes. When the smaller one accidentally spilled juice, she immediately curled into a ball, protecting her head with her arms. Hey, it's okay," David had said quickly, grabbing paper towels. "Accidents happen. Nobody's mad. You're not in trouble." She'd peeked at him through her arms, disbelieving. "Really?" He'd said gently. "It's just juice. We'll clean it up together, okay?" That night, while washing their clothes, David found something in the smaller twin's pocket. It was a photograph, torn and crumpled, but still recognizable. Two little girls, much younger, maybe 4 years old, stood between a smiling couple. The man had his arms around the woman, and she was holding both girls. They all looked happy. David turned it over. On the back, in fading ink, it said, "Forever loved. Mom and Dad, 2019. His heart clenched. These were their parents. The ones who died. The ones who would never have let this happen to their daughters. He showed it to Patricia the next day. "I think I need to find out what really happened to these girls. Who they really are." "The birth certificates," Patricia reminded him. "Did that woman give you real ones?" David pulled them out from where he'd hidden them in a drawer. They looked legitimate enough. The girls' full names were Lily Ann Williams and Rose Marie Williams. Born July 15, 2017. Parents listed as Robert James Williams and Jennifer Marie Williams. That evening, after the girls were asleep on their floor nest, David sat at his computer and started searching. It didn't take long to find the news article. "Local couple dies in tragic accident," the headline read. The article was from 2 years ago. Robert and Jennifer Williams had been driving home from a dinner date when a drunk driver ran a red light and hit them head-on. Both were killed instantly. They left behind twin daughters, aged 6, who went to live with Jennifer's sister. But the sister wasn't named. David kept searching, digging deeper into public records and old social media posts. Finally, he found it. Jennifer had a sister named Crystal Reeves. In old photos from before the accident, Crystal looked different, softer, maybe even kind. But something had changed. David found more information. After the accident, the girls went to live with their uncle, Tom Williams, Robert's brother. Crystal had married Tom just 3 months after the accident, which seemed fast. Then, according to an obituary, Tom died from a heart attack barely a year later. That meant Crystal, who wasn't even a blood relative, had been left as the girls' guardian. And from what David could see, she'd seen them as a burden, not family. He showed everything to Patricia the next morning. "There's more," he said. "I found references to a trust fund. The grandparents set it up for the girls before they died. It should have been paying for their care." Patricia's eyes narrowed. If there was money for them and they were living like that, she was stealing from them, David finished. She was supposed to be taking care of them, using their money to do it, and instead she treated them like slaves. The anger he felt was hot and sharp. Those little girls had lost their parents, then lost their uncle, then suffered for years under a woman who saw them as nothing more than a payday. That afternoon, something happened that changed everything. David was reading on the couch while the girls colored quietly on the floor. The smaller twin, the one David was pretty sure was Rose based on the photograph, suddenly got up and walked over to him. She stood there for a moment, just looking at him. Then in a voice so quiet he almost missed it, she said one word. "Safe?" David felt tears spring to his eyes. It was the first word either of them had spoken to him. One single word, but it meant everything. He knelt down so they were eye level. "Yes," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're safe. I promise you're safe." Rose studied his face like she was trying to decide if she could believe him. Then she did something that broke David's heart and put it back together at the same time. She reached out and touched his hand, just for a second, before running back to her sister. Lily looked up at him too, and for the first time, he saw something other than fear in her eyes. It might have been hope. It was hard to tell, but it was different. Patricia came by that evening and David told her about the breakthrough. She smiled, but it was bittersweet. "They're starting to trust you. That's beautiful, David. But it also means you need to make some decisions soon. The longer you wait to contact authorities, the harder this gets." "I know," David said. "I've been thinking about it. I need to talk to a lawyer, right? Figure out if there's any way to do this that doesn't end with me in jail and them in the system." "That's a good start," Patricia agreed. "I know someone. A family lawyer who specializes in complicated cases. Let me make a call." That night, David sat in the dark living room after the girls went to sleep. He could hear their quiet breathing from the other room. In just 1 week, they'd become part of his life in a way he never expected. He thought about Mia, about how she'd always wanted siblings, how she'd begged for a little sister. Maybe this was meant to be. Maybe that's why he'd stopped at that specific gas station at that specific time. Maybe Mia had led him there, knowing these girls needed someone and he needed them too. But he also knew Patricia was right. The situation couldn't continue like this indefinitely. He had to find a legal path forward, even if it meant risking everything. Those girls deserved more than hiding. They deserved real safety, real protection, and a real future. The next morning would mark the beginning of week 2. David had called the lawyer Patricia recommended and had an appointment for Monday. In the meantime, he had to focus on helping Lily and Rose heal, at least a little bit. He made them pancakes again for breakfast. This time when he set the plates down, Rose looked up at him and whispered another word. "Thank you." 2 words in 2 days. It felt like a miracle. David smiled at her. "You're welcome, sweetheart." Lily was watching this exchange carefully. She didn't speak, but David saw her squeeze her sister's hand. They were both starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, this place really was different. This person really was safe, and David was determined to prove them right, no matter what it took. Monday morning came faster than David wanted. He'd spent the weekend trying to prepare himself for the meeting with the lawyer, but nothing could really prepare him for confessing what he'd done. He'd bought 2 children. No matter how good his intentions were, that fact remained. Patricia had agreed to watch Lily and Rose while he went to the appointment. The girls had been with him for almost 2 weeks now, and while they were still quiet and scared much of the time, small changes kept appearing. Rose was speaking in whispers now, mostly to her sister but occasionally to David. Lily still hadn't said a word, but she'd started drawing. The drawings worried David, dark figures looming over small ones. A house with bars on the windows. 2 stick figures locked in what looked like a closet. Patricia had looked at them with a trained eye and said they were the girls' way of processing trauma. Every picture told a story of their past, and none of them were happy stories. The law office was in a nicer part of town, in a building with actual elevators that worked. David found the right door and stepped inside. The receptionist, a young woman with kind eyes, told him attorney Rebecca Foster would see him shortly. He sat in the waiting area, his leg bouncing nervously. What if the lawyer called the police right there? What if this whole thing ended with him in handcuffs? "Mr. Chen?" A woman appeared in the doorway. She was probably in her 40s with gray streaking through her dark hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. "I'm Rebecca Foster. Please come in." Her office was lined with law books and family photos. David sat across from her desk and she studied him for a moment before speaking. "Patricia Murphy called me about your situation. She told me some of it, but I need to hear everything from you. And I need you to be completely honest, because I can't help you if I don't know the full truth." David took a deep breath and told her everything. The gas station, the transaction, the past 2 weeks. Everything Patricia had discovered about the girl's condition, and what he'd learned about their background. Rebecca listened without interrupting, taking notes occasionally, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she leaned back in her chair and said, Mr. Chen, what you did was illegal. You could be charged with child trafficking even though you clearly didn't intend to harm these children. David's stomach dropped. I know, but I couldn't leave them there. I understand that. And frankly, if you'd called the police that night, there's no guarantee those girls would have been protected. The system is overwhelmed. But here's the situation now. You have 2 children living with you illegally. Their legal guardian essentially sold them to you, which means she committed multiple crimes. Those girls have been abused and neglected, and there's apparently money that should have been used for their care. So what do I do? David asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Rebecca folded her hands on her desk. You do what you should have done 2 weeks ago, but you do it right. You contact Child Protective Services. You tell them everything. You provide all the documentation Patricia has compiled. You show them that you've been caring for these girls properly, and that you want to continue doing so. Will they arrest me? I can't promise they won't. But I can be there with you when you make the report. I can make it clear that you were trying to protect vulnerable children and that you've been responsible in their care. The fact that you're coming forward voluntarily will work in your favor. The fact that the girls are thriving under your care will work in your favor. But David, there are no guarantees here. David felt like he couldn't breathe. What happens to Lily and Rose? That depends on a lot of factors. CPS will investigate. They'll interview the girls, examine them, look at your home. If they determine the girls are safe with you, you might be able to keep them temporarily as an emergency foster placement while everything gets sorted out. Or they might place the girls elsewhere while the investigation continues. They can't be separated, David said urgently. They've been through too much. They need each other. I'll make that clear to CPS. Keeping siblings together is always the goal, but again, no promises. David left the office an hour later with a plan. Rebecca would contact Child Protective Services on his behalf and arrange for them to meet. She'd be present during all interviews and would begin the process of applying for emergency foster custody. She'd also start investigating Crystal's theft of the trust fund money. One more thing, Rebecca had said as he was leaving. Those girls are going to need therapy, professional help. What they've been through, losing their parents, then losing their uncle, then years of abuse, that's going to take time to heal. You need to be prepared for that. David drove home feeling like he was carrying a weight he couldn't quite lift. When he got back to his apartment, Patricia met him at the door with a concerned look. How did it go? We're calling CPS tomorrow. Patricia nodded slowly. It's the right thing to do. I know, but I'm terrified. Inside, the girls were sitting on the couch together looking at a picture book Patricia had brought. They looked up when David entered and he saw the question in their eyes. They could sense something was different. He sat down on the coffee table facing them. Hey girls, I need to talk to you about something important. They both tensed and Rose grabbed Lily's hand. You're not in trouble, David said quickly, and you're safe. I promised you that and I meant it. But tomorrow some people are going to come here to talk to us. They're from an organization that helps children. They're going to ask you some questions about where you lived before and about the lady who was supposed to be taking care of you. Rose's eyes went wide with fear. In a trembling whisper, she asked, Going back? David's heart broke. No, sweetheart. You're not going back to her. Never. These people want to make sure you're okay and that you're being taken care of properly. They might seem a little scary, but they're trying to help. Lily's hand had found its way to David's knee. She didn't say anything, but her touch said everything. Please don't let us go. Please keep us safe. I'm going to do everything I can to keep you safe, David promised. But I need you to be brave tomorrow and tell these people the truth about what happened before you came here. Can you do that? Rose nodded hesitantly. Lily just gripped his knee tighter. That night, David barely slept again. He kept thinking about all the ways tomorrow could go wrong. The girls could be taken away. He could be arrested. Everything he'd tried to do could fall apart. But when morning came, he got up, made breakfast, and tried to act normal for the girls' sake. Patricia arrived early to provide moral support. Rebecca showed up at 9 o'clock sharp, looking professional and prepared. At 9:30, there was a knock on the door. The CPS worker was a woman named Karen Martinez. She was younger than David expected, maybe in her early 30s with a tired but kind face. She had a police officer with her, which made David's heart sink, but Rebecca had warned him this might happen. Mr. Chen, I'm Karen Martinez from Child Protective Services. This is Officer Williams. Your attorney contacted us about a situation involving 2 minor children. David stepped aside to let them in. The girls had retreated to the corner of the couch, holding each other and watching with terrified eyes. For the next hour, David explained everything while Rebecca sat beside him. Karen took notes, constantly asking questions, requesting documentation. Patricia provided her medical findings and photos of the girls' injuries when they'd first arrived. Karen's expression grew darker as she looked through everything. "These injuries are consistent with long-term abuse and neglect," she said quietly. Then she looked at David. "Mr. Chen, what you did was illegal and dangerous. You should have contacted authorities immediately." "I know," David said, "but I was afraid they'd be hurt or disappear before anyone could help them." Karen studied him for a long moment. "I understand why you felt that way, and it's clear you've been providing appropriate care, but we need to investigate this fully. I need to speak with the girls alone." David started to protest, but Rebecca put a hand on his arm. "It's standard procedure." Karen approached the girls slowly, crouching down to their level. "Hi, Lily and Rose, my name is Karen. I know you're scared, but I'm here to help. Can I talk to you for a few minutes?" "Just you and me?" The girls looked at David with panic in their eyes. "It's okay," he said gently. "You can talk to her. I'll be right in the next room." It took some coaxing, but eventually Karen was able to interview the girls in the bedroom, while David waited in the kitchen with Rebecca, Patricia, and Officer Williams. The waiting was torture. David kept straining to hear what was being said, but their voices were too quiet. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, Karen emerged. Her face was pale. "Mr. Chen, can you tell me everything you know about Crystal Reeves?" David told her about the gas station encounter, about his research into the girls' background, about the trust fund that should have been supporting them. Karen's jaw tightened. Those girls just confirmed severe neglect and abuse. They were locked in a closet for punishment. They were fed once a day, sometimes less. They were forced to do household chores from morning to night. And they witnessed Crystal stealing money that belonged to them. The room was silent for a moment. Then Karen continued. "Rose told me that Crystal said she was going to get rid of them that night at the gas station. That if nobody took them, she was going to leave them somewhere and drive away." David felt sick. He'd saved them just in time. Officer Williams spoke up. "We need to locate Crystal Reeves immediately. This is a criminal matter now." Karen nodded, then looked at David. "Mr. Chen, under normal circumstances, I would remove these children from your care while we investigate. But given the circumstances, and given that the girls are clearly bonded to you and have shown improvement in your care, I'm going to recommend emergency foster placement with you pending a full investigation." Relief flooded through David. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Karen said. "This isn't over. We need to do a home study. You'll need to undergo a background check. The girls will need medical and psychological evaluations, and you'll need to take foster parent training. If any red flags come up, they'll be removed immediately." "I understand. And Mr. Chen, if you ever do something like this again, if you ever take a child without going through proper channels, you will be prosecuted. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am." Karen turned to the girls who were peeking out from the bedroom doorway. "Lily and Rose, you're going to stay here with Mr. Chen for now. But I'm going to visit regularly to make sure everything is okay, and you're going to see some doctors and counselors who will help you feel better. Is that okay?" Rose nodded. Lily just stared. After Karen and Officer Williams left, David sat down heavily on the couch. Rebecca patted his shoulder. "That went as well as it could have. She could have removed them immediately." "What happens now?" David asked. "Now we wait. CPS will investigate. They'll look for Crystal, and when they find her, she'll be arrested. They'll verify the trust fund situation. You'll go through the foster parent process. And with luck, in a few months, we can start talking about adoption." "Adoption?" David's head snapped up. Rebecca smiled slightly. "That's the goal, isn't it? To make this permanent? These girls need a family. And from what I can see, they've chosen you." After Rebecca and Patricia left, David sat with the girls and tried to explain what would happen next. "There are going to be some appointments," he said. "Doctors who will make sure you're healthy, and someone to talk to about your feelings. But you'll keep living here with me, and I'll be with you every step of the way." Rose looked at him with those big, serious eyes. "Promise?" "I promise." That evening, something unexpected happened. David was washing dishes when he felt a tug on his shirt. He looked down to find Lily standing there, looking up at him. She opened her mouth, and for the first time since he'd met her, she spoke. "Dad?" It was barely a whisper, more of a question than a statement. David felt tears spring to his eyes. He knelt down so he was at her level. "Yeah, sweetheart. I can be your dad, if you want me to be." Lily nodded, then did something she'd never done before. She hugged him. It was brief and tentative, but it was real. Rose appeared a moment later and joined the hug, and David found himself holding these two little girls who'd been through so much and somehow still had the courage to trust again. Over the next few weeks, things moved quickly. The police found Crystal at her sister's house 2 states away. She was arrested and charged with child endangerment, fraud, and embezzlement. The investigation revealed she'd stolen over $80,000 from the girls' trust fund over 2 years. Lily and Rose started seeing a therapist named Dr. Chen, no relation to David, which the girls found funny. Slowly, painfully, they began to talk about what they'd been through. The nightmares came more frequently at first as they processed their trauma, but David was there every time, sitting outside their door until they fell back asleep. David completed his foster parent training and passed all the background checks. Karen visited regularly, and each time she seemed pleased with the progress she saw. The girls were gaining weight, smiling more, playing with the toys Patricia kept bringing over. One afternoon, almost 2 months after that first night, David came home from a meeting with Rebecca to find the girls had made something for him. It was a drawing, but unlike the dark pictures Lily used to make, this one showed 3 stick figures holding hands in front of a house. Above it, in Rose's careful handwriting, it said, "Our family." David put it on the refrigerator where it would stay for years to come. Looking at it, he thought about that night at the gas station, about the impossible choice he'd made, about how one moment of courage had changed 3 lives forever. The legal battles weren't over. The adoption process would take time. But standing in his kitchen looking at that drawing, David knew they were going to be okay. They were already a family. The paperwork would just make it official. 3 months had passed since that life-changing night at the gas station, and David's apartment had transformed into something that actually felt like a home. Children's drawings covered the refrigerator, books were scattered across the living room floor, and the sound of quiet giggles occasionally broke through the silence that had once defined the space. Lily and Rose were healing, slowly but surely. They still had nightmares. They still flinched at loud noises. But they were also laughing sometimes, playing with dolls Patricia had bought them and speaking in full sentences. Rose had become quite chatty once she felt safe, while Lily was more reserved but would talk when she had something important to say. David had settled into a routine that felt natural. Wake up, make breakfast, get the girls ready for their tutoring sessions since they weren't quite ready for regular school yet, take them to therapy twice a week, and spend evenings reading stories or watching cartoons together. He'd gone back to work part-time, and Patricia had become like a grandmother to the girls, watching them when he couldn't be there. Everything seemed to be moving in the right direction. Then on a Tuesday morning, Karen from CPS called with unexpected news. "David, we've located a relative of the girls, their maternal grandmother." She didn't know they existed. David felt his stomach drop. "What do you mean she didn't know?" Jennifer, the girl's mother, was estranged from her family. The grandmother, Helen Monroe, had no idea Jennifer had children. She's been living in Oregon for the past decade. When our investigation turned up her information, we contacted her. She wants to meet the girls. After hanging up, David sat at his kitchen table, his head in his hands. He'd known this was a possibility. He'd known that somewhere out there the girls might have family. But he'd started to believe they would stay with him, that they would become officially his through adoption. Now there was a grandmother, a blood relative, someone with a legitimate claim. When he told the girls that evening, trying to keep his voice steady, their reactions broke his heart. "We don't want to leave," Rose said, tears already forming in her eyes. "We want to stay with you." Lily, who was usually so quiet, grabbed David's arm. "You promised. You promised we were safe." "You are safe," David said quickly, pulling them both close. "This lady, your grandmother, she's not like Crystal. She's your mom's mom. She didn't know about you before, but now she does, and she wants to meet you. That's all. Just meet you." "And then?" Rose asked, her voice small and scared. David didn't have an answer. He didn't know what would happen after the meeting. Would Helen want custody? Did she have the right to take them? Would a judge choose blood relation over the bond the girls had formed with him? The meeting was scheduled for the following week at the CPS office. Helen was flying in from Oregon specifically for this. Rebecca advised David to stay calm and let the girls see that he supported them, having a relationship with their biological family, even though inside he was terrified of losing them. The night before the meeting, neither girl could sleep. David found them both in his room at 2 a.m, standing by his bed like small ghosts. "Can we stay here?" Lily whispered. He pulled back the covers and they climbed in, one on each side of him, just like he used to do with Mia when she was scared. They fell asleep eventually, but David stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if these might be some of his last nights with them. The CPS office waiting room felt sterile and cold. David sat with the girls, who were dressed in the nice clothes Patricia had helped them pick out. Rose was gripping his hand so tight it hurt, and Lily was pressed against his other side. Karen appeared with a woman David assumed was Helen. She was in her early 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and eyes that were the same shade as the girls' eyes. She looked nervous and sad and hopeful all at once. "Lily? Rose?" Helen said softly, her voice breaking. "I'm your Grandma Helen. I was your mommy's mommy." The girls didn't move, just stared at this stranger who claimed to be family. Helen's eyes filled with tears. "You look just like her. Jennifer was beautiful, just like you two." She pulled out her phone and showed them a photo. "This is your mom when she was about your age, see? You have her smile." Rose leaned forward slightly, curious despite her fear. Lily stayed pressed against David. The meeting lasted an hour. Helen told them stories about their mother, about how Jennifer loved to paint and sing, about how she'd always wanted to travel the world. She showed them more pictures, and gradually, the girls began to relax, asking questions about the mother they barely remembered. "Why didn't you know about us?" Rose asked at one point. Helen's face crumpled with sadness. "Your mom and I had a fight a long time ago before you were born. I said some things I shouldn't have said, and she stopped talking to me. I tried to reach out, but she'd moved and changed her number. I didn't even know she'd gotten married or had babies. If I had known," she wiped her eyes. "If I had known, I would have been there. I would have helped. I'm so sorry you went through what you did." After the meeting, Helen asked to speak with David privately while Karen stayed with the girls. "Mr. Chen," Helen began, her voice formal but kind. "I want to thank you for what you did for my granddaughters. Karen told me everything. What that woman put them through and how you rescued them." "I just did what anyone should have done," David said quietly. "No." Helen shook her head. "Most people would have walked away. You didn't. You saved them, and from what I can see, you've been a wonderful father to them." David's throat tightened. "They're amazing kids. I love them." Helen was quiet for a moment, studying his face. "I can see that. And they clearly love you too. Mr. Chen, I need to be honest with you. When Karen first called me, my first thought was that I needed to take them, to bring them home with me. They're my daughter's children. They're all I have left of her." David's heart sank. Here it came, the moment he'd been dreading. "But," Helen continued, "I've spent this past week thinking and praying about what's best for Lily and Rose. They've been through so much trauma. They've lost their parents, lost their uncle, suffered years of abuse. And finally, they found stability with you. They found someone who loves them and keeps them safe." "What are you saying?" David asked carefully. "I'm saying that I'm not going to fight you for custody. Those girls need you. They've chosen you as their father, and I can see that you've chosen them as your daughters. What they need now is stability, not another upheaval." Relief flooded through David so intensely he almost couldn't breathe. "Thank you. Thank you so much. But," Helen raised a hand, "I would like to be part of their lives. I'd like to visit, to call, to be their grandmother if..."